put up on our website after. Wonderful. Okay, so let me get a quick count of people who have a nav bar finished. And it's okay if you haven't. That's good. Okay. And let's get a quick count of people who have a text inputs group finished. That's good. What about a button? So what I thought I would do, what's that?
I have a button, but it doesn't do anything yet.
Let me just say that the last time I spoke with you all, I was really showing you a lot of code. And I was saying, okay, this is what you need. Does that make sense? And I was saying, oh, this is actually a great quick start. I know we were using our template. And I was not going through the basics. I was really assuming that you had some CSS basics. So you understood CSS, that you understood what a CSS class was, and that you understood what an HTML entity was. And that I felt like I was dropping a lot of big, chunky ideas on you guys, and I was going to ask you to work through it. And that's good. That's what a good program does. But what I want to do is fill in a little bit of blanks. And before we move on, I wanted to step back, and I wanted to do a little bit more about how to build something like this from the ground up, which is something I hadn't done. And I thought if you're struggling or you know what I'm saying, you guys don't struggle. And I use that with quotes because you guys don't struggle. You guys struggle with nothing. You guys crush everything. But if you had some blind spot where you were kind of like you knew that you didn't know something, that's a terrible feeling. And you're like, I know that I don't know this. How do I go and get that skill? And I was looking back through my older lectures and I was thinking, well, why don't we just build a little bit together and then we'll kind of refresh, and that will allow people to go the last mile and finish. Because you're probably at the 7-yard line trying to score and there's things you need to iron out. So now what I love about this, I was just looking at the docs, is that there's a quick start. And frankly, this looks very, very, very similar to the template that we're used to working with. Or let's boost the presentation. Our template is very simple. It's just a couple of lines that help us get started. I am of the type where I'm more into, I like to know an incredible inventory of things, but I don't like to memorize something when I want to go for breadth. So I want to know, I want my awareness to be as wide as it can be, and then I want to give myself the ability, like 2 hours, to get myself into any area and adapt it. Does that make sense? That means a lot to me. I'm that kind of a learner. Now, other people, they're incredible memorizers, and they just can recap and they can regurgitate. If that's you, then more power to you. I find that I need a quick refresher to get me up and going again, but I'm much more interested in knowing and being aware of a great many things. That's me. But what I like about this here in the docs, the introduction of the docs, is there's a quick start. And it was sort of saying create a new index file. And also we can add the bootstrap to it. And I thought, well, that's really great. Let's go ahead and copy that. Now, a few elements here were in the source is it's linking the bootstrap CSS directly, the min CSS, which is the faster of the two. And then it's getting us up and running really quickly. So let's go ahead and grab that and we'll go into our editor. And I hope that's big enough. I hope that's probably right. And this just happens to be my project organization. So what you can do is find your sort of project root, and I'm going to say a new file, and I'm going to call that the BS template .html. Now it's called BS template because it stands for Bootstrap. I really don't like to type more than I have to. It introduces errors and it slows me down. So I like to think in terms of acronyms and initials of things. So let's go ahead and build in BS template. And then let's go ahead and just to review, I had copied it from the docs getting started, include Bootstrap. And I was thinking, well, that's just great. And let's go ahead and save that. Now, let me give you a quick quiz. What is this giving me? What do I have? What did this copy paste operation give me? and just think it for a second. What is this template giving me? And some of the big things are, well, it's giving me the pre-compiler directive advantages of having the CSS. Now, CSS is a way to give me lots of classes, and classes are what I'm going to need in order to build the visual environment of a Bootstrap website. So this is good. And let's go ahead and let's go and get the nav that we were interested in. And what we're going to do, just to presage just to give you, is we're going to go inside of the body and probably insert the nav bar somewhere along here. Now, the challenge with a nav bar is that it provides you a global navigation. So if you have a nav bar, then you can move around inside of the site. And so it means that you need to implement the nav bar on each of your pages. Does that make sense? And so this class is more about getting you very good with the fundamentals, but it's not a work class. It's not a intensive work class. It's more about high touch, polytechnic, learning by doing, but it's not a workaholic class. So we're not like, oh, create 20 pages and for each of the pages, create the same nav bar. It's not a repetition class. It could be, maybe it should be, but it's not. And it's because I know you guys you're a Southern California student where you have 400,000 things going on. You're not a classical residential student with nowhere to go in your pajamas. In which case we should give you the 20 pages and we should make you work. Like 20 hours a week per class is fine. It's not that way here. So that's me talking a lot. So let's get into the nav bar. And let's kind of go shopping. And that's a good drop down. So that has a lot of what we're looking for. So before we copy this, can you guys see this code, by the way? Is that big enough? Folks in the back, can you see this fine? Can you see this okay? Okay. I suppose I could expand it. Yeah, that's better. Okay. So this is your standard nav bar. You can see how it's compressing and how ineffective that is. It's better for us to go back to this. Can you see this size? You guys are saying yes, and I appreciate it. But so the reason why we use CSS is because we want to introduce the idea of a class. A class is a part of CSS that gives us design components. Now, there are many different variables that we can encode inside of a CSS file. And those different variables give us size, it gives us color, it gives us line width, line weight, it gives us behaviors. Does that make sense? So anytime we have design details that we want to imbue into any HTML entity, we want to encode that within a CSS class. So the class here is navbar, and then it grabs a hold of these other classes. So we're actually combining a navbar with a background light, and that gives us the coloring that we're looking for, that kind of celestial, kind of smoky color. And then we're going to implement a container. And then within that, we'll create different elements. Like, for example, this one includes this navbar button right here. Some of these we want to eliminate. So and the way that we shop for things on the web that we want to implement is we right click and we go inspect. Can you guys say inspect?
Inspect.
Inspect. See? And so you see the viewport has compressed. And so it's changed the way that it's computing the width. So this appears. You realize if we got rid of our inspect, that compressor it disappears. But it appears when the dimensionality of the page changes. So the JavaScript is looking for changes. So immediately This is looking to fold itself in and out. And that's because of the arrival of phones and superphones. Does that make sense? So in many ways, I was talking to students about how iPhone really speeds up the adoption of Bootstrap. It eliminates Flash, and it really, Bootstrap has moved in to replace Flash as the cornerstone for web design and UX experience. But also, the iPhone adopts a mobile HTML platform. So it's a highly prevalent personal computer that is 1/5 the width of a regular browser. So we need to have a universal HTML runtime in addition to something that adapts to the many different viewport form factors. So in my mind, the iPhone is the first move. The second move is probably the Samsung phones, the ginormous, the teeny bopper phones that now everybody uses, these super phones. Now they're grandma phones. Grandma has a gigantic phone when it used to be that it was the 17-year-old gamer kid who had these super phones. So if you begin to think about all the different form factors that are out there, there are probably thousands of different combinations of screens and websites. And so how do we bridge that combinatoriality, that sheer diversity? We need one platform to deliver experiences, hence Bootstrap. So that's just a review. I'm a teacher, so I like to talk. You have to put up with that. So this is kind of our working area, but we want to isolate. So that drop down right there, if I can highlight that using my inspect, that highlights the area that pertains to me, which happens to be, and let's expand this. So there's a little bit of sleuthing that you have to do. You have a little detective work. And so you can see that there is this nav link drop-down toggle that we need to pay attention to. That's a lot. That's a lot of close reading. That's a challenge to new students. I'm kind of used to it, but it challenges me. It challenges me, and it probably challenges you. But it means that amidst the example, there are many exemplary styles and elements, but the one that we want is nav link drop-down toggle. That happens to be when we're targeting. And so if we take a look at the computed dimensions, and I'm getting that, having difficulty loading that, so I may need to go back to that. The CSS actually has computed dimensions. Does that make sense? And so all of these variables, that is what CSS is giving us. CSS is a separate runtime that's giving us a series of design-related parameters that impact the way that this thing works. So it means that the author of this particular style library, and let's reselect, has the ability to encode all of these design parameters just into one component. How interesting is that? So the question for us as developers is, should we be doing it ourselves and reinventing the wheel, or should we be enthusiastic about implementing somebody else's CSS? And I'm going to leave that as a question mark, because what I find happening right now is that people are offloading design sensibility to others, but that's making them much more productive as developers. And so that's a trade-off. And I know here in Southern California, we like to build our own motorcycle. Like, we like the energy required to be creative. That intrigues us. So it depresses us, and we begin to look around like, do we have the right to copy and paste something? And the answer is not without fear. You can copy and paste things, but you have to worry. So under what conditions do you borrow from other people? That's a question mark. Frankly, Bootstrap is there to be appropriated. So you're not copying and pasting, you're using it. And for us, that's difficult because Bootstrap is intellectual property. How can you go about, Mr. Bunn, recommending that we just use something because the purpose of it is for you to use it? And so I think if you went and interviewed the people at Twitter who develop and who initiated Bootstrap, I think you'll find that their intention was to allow everybody to make superb websites. The people at Twitter just gave it away out of altruism. They said built in SF with love. That's kind of interesting. We're not used to that. That's not the Southern California mentality where you build something, it's your property, and then you leverage that. They're kind of giving it away. So there's a little free history lesson there. So all of these design parameters are encoded the minute that you use class navlink dropdown toggle. So let's go ahead and borrow the vast majority of this. And why don't we put it into our body? And I think some of this we're going to need. So here's my body. Here's where I started. And I'm going to assume that we want to keep the container. And these kind of things, I'm going to begin to question which one of these we really need. Drop down menu, and then we need the toggle. So most likely, this is something that we're going to need, and this is something that we're going to need. But you realize that the components of the nav bar happen as ULs. So for example, I predict that we get to throw this away, this away, this away, this away, and most likely we will begin to implement this stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save, and hopefully you're not snickering at my BS template. It's all right. You have the right to snicker. And then let's try to reveal in Explorer. There we are. And given I'm using Windows. So the philosophy here is right-click on your file inside of VS Code or wherever your editor is, and then try to discover where the real location of that file is on your system. So if you're on a Mac, probably it needs to open up in Finder. Finder is the equivalent to Explorer for Mac, and probably that's all the systems we have here. So here I've located the file, and then, so here's what I've done is my site looks this way. Now, if you think about what is extraneous, and you'll see if I minimize this, it will, if I phonify, it shrinks. And then if I reconfigure it, recomputes viewport. Viewport is the XY height width of the browser window. Okay, so my next move is to inspect. And now that I've got some building blocks here, there are some things that I want to delete, and there's some things I want to keep. So I want to delete that. So nav link active, let's remember that goes. The link, nav link goes. The drop down, that stays. So if you look back at the HTML, nav item, nav item, nav item drop down, that's what we need to keep. The disabled, that means that it's grayed out. It's not yet turned on. That we'll get rid of. So that kind of inspires us to get back to our editor and go to our BS template, Snickers allowed, our Bootstrap template, and say to ourselves, okay, we want to capture the nav bar. We want to capture the container, non-negotiable. Navbar brand, maybe, but I think for sure we want to begin to disable collapse navbar, maybe. I'm going to keep that because I didn't see that as something I need to eliminate. But this, you realize that the UL class is kind of the container that contains the element that we want. So we don't want to delete that. We want to keep it. Now, let me ask you, when was the last time you guys saw a UL tag? What were we doing? That was maybe a couple weeks ago. You were several weeks younger. Your life, several weeks in the the life of a college kid is like years for everybody else. Like, you were a different person 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I don't mean to look you right in the eye. I don't know exactly, but UL, that was unordered list. And what you were doing is you were saying, well, when I make a UL, it creates a dot such as I would see inside of Microsoft Word. And then inside of that, I have LIs. And so what is nav item dropdown? Well, it's a list item. So what I do not want to do is delete the UL. This is true throughout the Bootstrap ecosystem. We have ULs, then we have LIs. So let's nav item menu, nav item dropdown. That sounds cool. Let's go control. What I did is I pressed control and then /, which is where the question mark is on my keyboard. And I can undo it, and then I can also go like this. I can right click and I can comment that. Oh, I don't have the comment there. I'm sorry. Most editors will allow you to go control, then question mark or /, and that will comment that. That adds HTML commenting. I'm going to go control S. That will back it up. And then let's quote unquote redeploy. Going control R here. And let's back this up a bit. And you can see we're beginning to gain control over our creative work here. We're not necessarily appropriating, we're kind of intelligently borrowing. So now we have the beginnings of a nav bar. So I think when you guys turn things in, I don't want to see everything from Bootstrap. I'd like to see that you made some choices and that you edited to get what you wanted. That's what matters. If you just borrow all the way, it has less credibility. To me, I'm a digital music person, and I think I have a very fine ear for things that are kind of borrowed. Digital music is very dependent upon borrowing. Hip hop is very dependent upon borrowing. Does that make sense? Borrowing is brought to a new level where it's like, we all know you're borrowing, but you're incorporating, you're appropriating with a little artistic license. Sometimes you need to ask people's permission. Sometimes, sometimes not. So let's go ahead and inspect and say that that dropdown is what we want. Let's kind of narrow it down. So that link dropdown toggle is where we need to make our creative work. So there's a few more dimensions. So we'll assume that that drop-down menu works. I think this button at the front is probably not something we want, maybe. Probably that, what do we need to eliminate? Let me just look over this. That word navbar is a button. Probably we can eliminate it. Why don't we make it our life's work to eliminate that right now? Okay. And we click on it and we're saying, okay, so that container fluid, navbar brand, navbar, A class navbar brand, that probably needs to go. That navbar toggler is that. We don't want to eliminate that. Toggler icon, we don't want to eliminate that. Collapsible, we don't want to eliminate that. So what we want to get rid of is potentially that navbar brand where it says navbar. And that seems safe. Instead of doing something dramatic, let's do something wimpy, and then we'll test it. So we'll comment it, we'll save it, and then we'll reload this guy. And again, reload that button, and it's beginning to take shape. The public loves to see things that are familiar, where they understand what to do next. We're not allowed to give people a user guide or you don't get a manual. You buy a $1,200 smartphone, you don't get a manual. Does that make sense? And that's the Steve Jobs world we're in. It has to be so simple that it's obvious how to use it. So A, it has to be familiar. But then B, it has to be original. So it has to be an original adaptation of something familiar. So when you buy a car, the minute you step in, you know what to do. But there's something distinguishing there's something proprietary about it. Now we're putting in effort here, and what else? We want to get rid of the frosted, the disabled. Let's get rid of that, and then let's reload. And so things are beginning to look proprietary at this point. And so let's get rid of hello world just because we know we can. And so hello world is outside, and we can say, welcome to our brand. That's fine. And let me say this. While we're here, let's have a little fun. Let's break the rules. Let's do something we're not supposed to do. So let's go in here. I want to introduce you guys to what's called the Jumbotron. No one asked for it, but we're giving it to them. So Jumbotron is this. It's one single part of a page where everything is different. The font is gigantic. And so let's go ahead and navigate to the Jumbotron. It's a Bootstrap classic. If I can find it. See our new example for a demo. Okay, well, let's do this. Since they won't give it to us, let's steal it. So here is the container that isolates the Jumbotron. Container is the whole page. That's the top. That light rounded, that looks pretty good. And so what we can do is we can copy the element, or we can copy the outer HTML. Why don't we try copy the element? I like the outer HTML. I want to see. No, I don't want to do that. I want to just copy the element. Copy the element, and let's see how far we can get. Because remind you, this Jumbotron is what we want to grab. If you show up with a Jumbotron, someone's going to high-five you. And so we have the nav at the top, and then let's drop in and implement the enclosing HTML. And then we'll say, that's right. That's right. And then we'll say, we custom. And let's back that up and touch this. Touch this. So I'm hoping that that's enough. I have these enclosures of the div. I'm staying out of the navbar's way. So I'm obeying this. And I know where the page begins because I have that H1. And let's see how close I am. And let's refresh this. And so I've got my Jumbotron at the top. Touch this. We custom. Okay, that's right. And so then it frees up and it isolates the drop down at the top. And I'm thinking, well, that's fine. Why don't we build up that drop down needs to turn to navigate. And I think you see where I'm going here. I'm just embedding a little custom text. And maybe make people, really focus on the way that you communicate with people. Take some interest in the way you are saying things. How does that impact people? And be willing to change things all day long. Our site, okay? So, so why don't we just kind of leave it at that, say examples of bootstrap Jumbotrons. And, they're all over the web. I mean, there's just no dearth of examples. So these are examples of jumbotrons, which are, this is going to let me boot. Oh, these are all examples where you have, they look like a Wix site, where there's a gigantic, iconic photograph to get you in the mood. And then we begin talking about our brand from there. And that's Jumbotron. Usually you have one opportunity on one page to make one Jumbotron. There's one opportunity. It's when people see your brand site for the first time. How inspired should they be? Now, let's be real. Everybody has a Jumbotron at this point. But that's fine. We're now, equivalent with everybody else. We're now doing something standard. So this will be welcome to our brand. And so now there's not the need to put an H1 right here because, and so maybe we reduce that to like an H3. And then we, so we say we begin paragraph content. And that's fine. And now we say, well, what's next? What do we want to, now we're missing some content. Do we want to divide the page into two big slices? Or, what is Apple doing right now? Apple has a process of stitching content together where they usually have two columns. And let's go into one of their components. Usually one side of the page is visual, the other side is informational. And they've kind of pioneered the stitching idea where they're really playing golf with us. They're really saying we've got one opportunity to wow. And so this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it with color. We're going to do it with gradient and lighting, product information, and then we're going to be very plain and simple and allow people to make a decision. And they obviously give you a chance to press the buy button. They know their value. So that stitching idea is compelling, but maybe within the Bootstrap world, we have a chance to do something Apple-esque, and we have a product page where this is kind of where this is the Apple idea and they kind of stage the content next to each other. And so, just to wrap it up, why don't we go for the Jordan, the three-pointer at the buzzer. Let's see if we can bring about something big at the end. So let's go ahead and say, this is kind of the jumbo of the page. Then this is the columnar, outcome, and these two columns are going to be there. And it looks like they have several columns, and then they have a footing at the bottom. That's fine. There's so much going on here. Why don't we go view source, view page source, which is the way that we used to look at the source of pages. And so what we want is, here's our header. The body is opening up here. And I think we want to avoid the header because we have a header, but we want everything else. They're going to give us a little bit of a Jumbotron to begin. And let's just kind of copy this and let's see where it leads us. And then we'll go all the way down to the footer and we'll copy that and we'll see how big a mess we're making. But we're not going to do that until we make a second. Let's copy this. And then we'll press Control V and then we'll rename this guy. And I won't go that much longer. I'm just going to freestyle a bit more. Now, what I like about my current page is I want to keep my nav bar. So I want to isolate the nav, and I'm going to knock out everything else, and I'm going to operate within the body. And let's go back to what I had here. I'm going to go copy, and then I'm going to paste that in. Now, I think I copy paste for a little while, and then what I've resigned that I'm going to customize it. And so let's go into our deployment and refresh. Oh, I'm on template 2. And so our site is there, but now we have the Apple-esque product stuff there. So now we've implemented that. And so now we're really looking to build up, to implement some images in the back of these. And so that's if we wanted to go the Apple direction, where we have a lot of visual collateral. We have a lot to show the customer. So I hope that's healthy. Now, let's do one more page where I said that I was going to end soon, and I kind of didn't mean it. But I'm proud of our nav. So let's grab the nav. And if I select nav, then it highlights the end of nav. So let's grab the nav, which is how we make a page.
Nav bar, expand.
And let's make a new template page. So let's grab template and we'll copy it. And then we'll paste it, Control V. And then we'll sort of set up a new name. And we'll say input group.html, right? And so I have my template there. Let's slam in my nav. And I think one of my templates has my nav. I think once I copy and pasted the file, it gave up my copied text. So let's go copy, then we'll implement this here. And then input group should be right next door. And we'll say, go ahead and open up in Explorer. And so input group is there. Sorry if that's hard to see. And it looks like it needs to have a little bootstrap at the top. So I need to grab hold of the bootstrap version of the head. And that's why it's failing. And I will build that in here instead, where we have a full head. And now I'm moving quickly, but I don't want to put you to sleep. And so now we have this back where we have our nav bar. And I'll figure out why that's not working in a sec. Somebody will tell me where I went wrong. And I've got some good stuff there. But did I enclose my nav properly? Yeah. We'll figure out in a minute what the problem with that is. And then let's experiment with a text input group, just because we began the conversation there. So we go to docs, give me 2 more minutes. It's rough looking at. So form control, these are very elaborate groups of text inputs. These are text groups with a lot of professional identity. That's nice. Ooh, that's really good. Let's try that. That's great. So let's just kind of grab that and we'll begin the process of molding it. And we'll put that in there and we'll do that inside of our input group. And then we'll reload it to see how far along we are. That's looking okay. And why doesn't my nav want to work up there? That's intriguing to me. So probably some things I want to work on is how to embed that form group within a set of columns. And so I want to end the lecture just because I've probably spoken enough, but probably I want to think about columns. And probably what I want to do is create an a row of columns where one set of columns is 8 long, and I want to put my form control inside of that. Or I want to create, and I can do another video on this if you like, I want to create a formation, and why don't we do this, where they have a beautiful checkout. Like, this is awesome because this is the form control, something very similar that I just made, but it's floating in the middle of the page. And so the checkout form. Yep.
I think I lost you. She's like, I think I was following well, and then I realized I skipped a step. How did you get it to hover again really quick, that in the nav bar?
Was it hovering from the start?
Just really quick.
I'm not going to answer that question yet. I just want to finish this, and then I'll get into it. And then we'll do a follow-up question. Okay. So that's our lead, and then right below us we have a 5-unit row and then another 5-unit row. And so we have a footer is a G5. So that's a 5-unit row, and that's a 7-unit row. And that's a big factor why this form looks as good as it does, because there's a bit of padding around the entire container. And that is my critique of what I've made thus far, is that the HTML is nice, but there's a lack of padding there. So that's a quick way to get started. And then, that's a way to spend 10 minutes productively. And then you get a break and get some caffeine or whatever. And then you come back and then you begin shaping it. And then, so probably I would come back here and say, well, let's put a container around this when we come back. And so the nav bar is fine. Let's isolate the nav. Why is that nav giving me problems? We'll figure that one out. And usually I come back in the second video, I'm like, oh, here's the solution. And so we have the form control. Most likely we'll put a series of rows, a container and a row and a column structure around that form container, so it isn't 100% of the width. So I want to thank you for working hard. Listening to lectures is not trivial. It's squirmy, rough, paying attention. It's physically demanding to listen to a lecture. So I get it. I appreciate you all. Keep it up.
I think I get lost.
Only a couple more months to go. Don't worry.